We changed our lives so drastically by quitting our careers, selling our primary house, and putting everything into storage so that we could travel the world, do what we want to do while we were still able and while we still can.
We actually both weren't happy in our jobs. We had to get out. We disliked the work, the politics, and the way things were run, and we just couldn't conform in that job anymore.
Yeah, it wasn't easy to just quit. There were a few things that pretty much brought us to our breaking point to decide that life is just too short to spend the majority of your time doing something you don't want to do in an environment you just don't want to be in.
Exactly. I remember just dreaming about leaving my job, but there was always the question in the back of my mind as to whether we could afford it. Should we leave? We're just comfortable in that job.
Yeah, well, I think it's because we thought about it for so long that it just became kind of like a snap decision. I know it wasn't, but it felt like that.
Yeah, I'm glad that we left. I couldn't even imagine how I put up with not being happy for so long.
Yeah, and I think it's important to share with others that life is too short. I mean, yes, we both essentially retired early, but we often meet people who just never really get the chance to do what they want to do because they're stuck in some job that they don't want to be in, or taking care of someone, or that they themselves are too sick to go anywhere. And I just never wanted to be like that.
Yeah, and it doesn't really have to do with traveling. It's all about doing what you want to do while you still can. For example, Tori, you injured your back suddenly at a trampoline park. That was 8 years ago. And
Exactly. I was supposed to have back surgery and I was told that if I didn't have the surgery that I would be put in an adult diaper for my whole life. I never did have the surgery and yes, I walk around in pain literally every day of my life, but I'm not letting that stop me from doing what I want. And that's actually one of the reasons that we do travel now because I can still walk. I can't bend or run, but I can still walk and I can still move enough to see the world and cruise, and I do it while I still can.
yeah, we have met a lot of people who seem to not be able to do much at all in port. There are people in canes, scooters on the ships, and yes, it's nice that they're on the ship, but they can't really do much when we're in port. Like for example, go for a hike.
Yeah. Well, you always hear these too late stories like people who retire or die suddenly or have a major injury or just they can't do something. At the very least, I want to show people that it isn't too late and that you can do something for yourself.
Yeah, it isn't easy for a lot of people to see how to do that though.
You know, I just wish we could help everyone though.
So, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Kirk and this is Tori, and we're here to share our story.
Kirktoristory.
Our story is about how we left our jobs, retired early so that we could make the most of our lives by doing what we want to do, which is travel by cruise ships.
Yeah. So now that you know we retired early, just briefly tell you that I was a high school teacher and Kirk was a supervisor in a manufacturing plant. And after my best friend at work suddenly died, I had my back injury, we had work issues. We just decided that life was just too short to sit around and wait for the right timing. And we kept hearing the same stories about people waiting around to do something, but they couldn't afford to do something, or they ended up getting too sick or not physically capable of doing anything, dying early before they got to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah, so we decided to do what we want to do now while we still can. And if we have to go back to work for whatever reason, we will do so. The timing was just right for us, and we are just biting the bullet and living our dream.
Yeah. So at the end of 2022, we were actually on a cruise ship and our house was up for sale earlier in the year, but we kind of forgot about it. We were on a cruise ship and sold our house. And that's kind of how our story started. Why a cruise ship?
Tori and I started cruising back in 2006. In fact, it was our first real date on a cruise ship.
That's right. I actually won a 3 day Bahamas trip on a cruise leaving from Florida. And I asked Kirk if he wanted to drive with me to Florida to do this timeshare cruise. And the cruise, remember, it was like a really tiny ship, but everybody was so friendly. We had a great and memorable experience. And it wasn't until a few years later that we decided that we would try another cruise vacation. because I was a teacher in Canada, the problem is I really had limited times of when I could get away. So when you factor in the time you need for itineraries, the cost of the flights, the hotels, and all of that, the time and everything just felt rushed and expensive. And of course, every aspect of a vacation was more expensive, as every other family would have the same time off, and you're always fighting for room on a ship.
We started traveling on princess cruises, as at the time it was known for being a more adult oriented. So once a year, we started going on 10-day cruises to exotic places around the world. We loved it, and we always thought that the cruise went by so quickly. Our days were packed with doing chores, evening shows, trivia, exercise games, meeting people, of course, eating, and we didn't have time to do everything we wanted to do on these cruise ships.
Yeah. So generally speaking, the majority of your costs are taken care of while you're on a cruise ship. So you have the cabin, unlimited food, like Kirk said, snacks, entertainment, activities, exercise. So you don't have to pay for things like heat or electricity, water, or anything like that. What you may have to pay for, though, is specialty dining, communication costs, excursions, laundry, or other services. But those are additional things that you'd likely have to pay on land anyway, right?
Exactly. In our opinion, living on a cruise ship could be a less expensive way to travel the world than any other ways of traveling around the world. For example, you could travel the world by living in hotels or Airbnbs or ways like house sitting, RVing, staying with friends, backpacking, buying or renting properties around the world. But it really depends upon what you want to do and what you feel your value is.
Yeah. So if you have a huge mortgage or high rent, then the cost of cruising could be cheap in comparison. But if you're living in a home that's completely paid for, the price could be similar or even less.
Yep, for us, we like the fact that everything is easy for us. You you don't have to spend our time cooking or doing things we don't want to do. We can decide to do what we want to do, when we want to do it, or even if we want to do it.
Mhm.
Cruise travel makes it easy. We don't have to drive in our car, fly, buy gas. To date, I believe we have been to 90 countries around the world,
Yeah.
10 different cruise lines, and almost 50 different cruise ships.
Yeah, that's quite a lot. But what we do is we like to share all of our information about cruising on all of the different cruises that we've been on. So you could find all of that on YouTube. When we used to have a Facebook account, we have blog posts about our cabins and the different ships and ways that we save money on travel. We have pictures of the destinations and information about the excursions, and actually quite a bit more. Floating cities.
A cruise ship in itself is its own destination. We don't really stick to one cruise line for that matter because all of them are so different and offer something unique. Many people have always asked us, "What's your favorite cruise ship?" or "What's your favorite cruise line?"
Yeah, and that is actually a really difficult question to answer. So I would always turn to the person and say, what is your motivation? What do you like about cruising? What's important to you when you cruise? So, for example, if you're looking for a cruise ship that only caters to adults with a fun and exciting kind of vibe, I would say, what, go on
Uh,
a Virgin cruise,
Virgin
eh?
Cruises,
Yeah.
probably.
But I would do that only on a transatlantic and not necessarily on a Caribbean cruise because it's a totally different experience, eh, Kirk?
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, I did make a video on YouTube. It's called Three Common Questions Cruisers Ask Us. And there's a whole section there about all of the different cruise lines that we've been on and what we like about each of them. So I'll link that below in this video.
Yeah, Tori, you have made a lot of videos about each cruise line
Mm-hmm.
and the cabin tours and things that you could do on board the ships.
Yeah, so I will link the playlists in the comments too. So you just have to scroll down and find it.
So, Tori, do you have a favorite cruise line?
Didn't you watch the video?
We like to experience different ships. It's just like visiting a new country. There is so much to explore and see on each ship because each one is unique, as I mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah, we've seen and participated in some really great venues on ships. Like we went roller skating on one.
Yep, we went to a planetarium,
Yeah, we've seen, well, we didn't do the bumper cars, but there were bumper cars, a flow rider, a roller coaster,
a TV studio, silent disco, midnight chef parties.
secret parties, skydiving, ice skating. That's just a couple of the things I can think of.
Exactly. Ship hopping.
Not only that, but the cruise ships take you to different parts of the world. So we've taken ships that start in one port and end in another, and then we just continue on to the next ship to take us somewhere new. We try to weave our itineraries together in a way to minimize the additional costs of flights or hotels in between the ship itineraries. So, for example, we came back from Barcelona, Spain, and it brought us to Miami, Florida. And the morning that we arrived in Miami, all we did was just call it Uber. And an hour later, we were boarding another ship in Fort Lauderdale. We have several experiences of just walking or taking a shuttle from one ship to the next. And it's really a relatively easy process overall.
Yep, we have walked from one ship to another in Barcelona, Buenos Aires, Fort Lauderdale, Los Angeles, Vancouver, San Diego, New York, Quebec, Sydney, Brisbane, almost every port that's a turnaround port, you can find a ship that is connecting and going possibly somewhere else.
Yep, and we also stayed in overnight hotels for a night or two, waiting for the next ship to pick us up in San Francisco, Barcelona, Buenos Aires, Yokohama, Los Angeles, Sydney, Brisbane. But although the hotels are great, we've also opted to do home exchanges. So that's where we stay in homes around the world with points that we accumulated from when we owned a house in Canada. So we've stayed in a few places in Canada and Australia for like no money.
Yep, exactly. There has been itineraries that we have been on where you could literally be stuck in a loop for months unless you make the decision to get out another way. So we have to fly out to locations to get to the next, or there's simply no other option.
Yeah. Well, we really never wanted to just repeat the same old itinerary over and over on the same ship either. So sometimes we would actually get off the ship and stay a couple of days in between in a hotel or do one of those home exchanges that we just mentioned, or maybe we do a road trip, or if we have to, we'll just take a plane ride.
Our favorite itineraries.
There have been so many wonderful places that we've been traveling to while we were traveling and living on a cruise ship. So, like Kirk said, we've been to 90 countries, and we could easily list all 90 places for you as each place has something wonderful to offer. But what are some of your most memorable itineraries, Kirk?
I would say Singapore, Estonia, Antarctica, Japan, New Zealand. What about you?
Well, I'd have to say Namibia, Greenland, Iceland, and Israel when it was still open. See, we're floating in the Dead Sea there.
Exactly.
Buy a cruise residence?
So we get asked all the time if we're traveling by cruise ships so much, by cruise line, why don't we buy a cruise residence like the 3 year one, for example?
Yeah. Of course, there's really good reasons why you should maybe buy a residence if you're going to travel that much. But the idea of it really never excited us as much because we like to ship hop. We really love seeing the different ships. We also like the idea of change. So we've been on ships where we literally couldn't wait to get off because of noisy or disrespectful people next door. Um, and sometimes we would just think to ourselves that we just don't want to be tied down to just one ship and maybe even stuck to somebody who our neighbor like turns their TV up at full blast or coughs all through the night, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So for us, going from ship to ship is a lot of fun. And if you don't like your neighbor, well, at least you don't have to stay in that cabin for years.
Mm,
The idea to us of owning a residence at sea would be like having a timeshare. You kind of have to use it to get your money's worth. So if something else came up, you'll probably hesitate to do it. And lastly, I think that some of the residences can rent their cabin. So again, it will you will be stuck not knowing who your neighbor is, and it could be uncomfortable.
yeah.
Retiring on land.
Do you think that living on a cruise ship is more affordable than living on land in Canada?
The cost of each ship, date, and itinerary really do vary. There are many factors that you would have to consider when adding up the cost of cruising full time.
Yeah, and some of those factors include the difference in cost between an interior cabin, an ocean view, a balcony, or a suite, the cost of daily gratuities, and they vary depending on the cabin choice that you have,
Mhm.
the additional costs that aren't included in your airfare, such as Wi Fi or excursions or specialty dining, drinks, special activities, incidentals, and that kind of thing. The transportation to go and leave from the cruise. So, for example, the flights that you take, hotels, Ubers, cabs, buses, and there's also travel insurance that you have to think about, and your personal costs, like your cell phone plan, and day to day things like getting your hair cut or anything like that. And what about even home costs? Like if you're still maintaining a home, like mail forwarding, insurance, maintenance, storage fees, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How do we keep our costs down?
So I guess people always ask us how we afford to cruise.
Yes, well, it's a lot about how to budget and it depends on how you want to cruise. But I wanted to mention that we've created a list of tips on how to get free things on ships, how to get free on board spending money, how to get free cruises, tips on how to pay less for cruises on they're all on YouTube. So we also have ideas on cruise hacks that involve saving money on a cruise or strategies to get the most bang for your buck on your cruise and things like how to get the highest status on a cruise line. For example, I have another video called Elite in 19 Days that I think everybody should watch, and I'll link it in the comments, not the comments, the description below.
Yes, so when we book our cruises, we have tried many different strategies from booking on the cruise ship itself, waiting for sales, and to book. And we try to book older ships
Mhm.
as well, as those are generally a little less expensive. We have found deals in many different ways.
Yeah, and another way to save money by cruising is transatlantic or trans-Pacific cruises, or like Kirk said, traveling on older ships, or traveling in off-peak seasons, or even in different places like the Caribbean. How we afford to do this.
We watch our budget and like to maximize our benefits that we have to keep our costs down.
Yes, and we have many other strategies that we put in the playlists on our channel. So things like using points on credit cards, getting money for spending from the stockholder perk, using the home exchange program, minimizing the cost of flights, hotels whenever possible by booking back-to-back cruises or vacations to go to see what other ships are in the same port.
Lifestyle changes and challenges.
Living on a cruise ship full time does have its pros and cons, and there are things that you may take for granted that you may not get to do as much of anymore.
For example, on a cruise ship, we don't get to drive our cars, we don't get to grab our bikes and go for a ride, we don't have a huge space to do any projects.
Yeah, on the other hand, we do get taken to different locations around the world, and we can make use of the free gym or some of the exercise classes around each ship that we go on. And we can participate in activities or use the spaces on the ship to do things like puzzles, or we could listen to a lecture, or even learn how to play the ukulele.
Yes, we treat the cruise ship like daily life as if we're at home, because essentially we are at home. So this means that we're still going to eat the same way and not overindulge in any of the rich food choices that are on the ship.
Mhm.
We make use of the ship facilities to exercise our bodies and minds, and we make time just for ourselves, as well as time to meet new people and learn new things.
Yeah, and I guess that brings me to another point, that another challenge of living on a ship is that you don't actually get to see your friends and family very often either. So most of our communication with them is over Zoom or WhatsApp. And depending on where we are in the world, the internet, it can be very costly. But ultimately, we do love meeting people, and we do have a great time in a casual environment. And most people who are on a cruise ship are there to relax, and they're there to unwind and just to have fun. And those are the kind of people that we actually like to be around.
But a lot of those friendships are just a couple of weeks long. But we have made over the years a handful of friends around the world that we stay in contact with, and we actually plan to go on other cruises with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there definitely is a cruise culture of, I guess you can call it like minded people. It's really quite nice.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that we covered what we want to say with you. So I guess what I'm trying to say in the end, we love to travel. We love the convenience of cruising the world. And really, there's no time like the present.
It does take a lot just to bite the bullet and make the decision to do something so drastic. But I really think that if you set your mind to do something, that things will work out.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, there's a lot of, it is kind of scary to just go off and do something like this, but we can save that for another video, or if you have other questions. But I would like to thank all of you for watching. And please don't hesitate. If you have further questions, or if you want to leave a comment below, we'd love to hear from you and get a chance to learn more about where you are, maybe in the process of retiring or moving on to a cruise ship.
Yeah, hopefully we have inspired you to do something different.
Yeah, hopefully. But please don't forget to take a minute to like and subscribe. And remember that I've linked a bunch of videos in the description. They're all on the YouTube channel. And really sincerely want to thank you again for watching. And we'll see you in the next video.